The Galactic Council chamber gleamed with polished metal and holographic displays, buzzing with the smug voices of its elite members. A dozen species, each more self-assured than the last, filled the grand hall, but none more so than Admiral Zorlok. His leathery skin shifted with irritation as he leaned back in his ornate chair, glaring at the holofeed displaying the incoming human fleet. "These are the ships Earth sends to face us," Zorlok scoffed, his voice dripping with condescension. "I've seen mining drones with more firepower." His comment earned a ripple of laughter from the council members, their vibrant robes rustling as they shifted in their seats. At the center of the chamber, a three-dimensional image flickered, showing the human fleet slowly advancing through the void of space. The ships appeared antiquated, with their bulky hulls and lack of the sleek, weaponized contours that marked other species' warships. But Captain Theron, standing aboard the bridge of the lead ship, was unshaken by their mockery. "Prepare for the jump," Theron ordered calmly, his voice betraying none of the tension that pulsed through his crew. Around him, the dim light of the command center reflected off the black steel consoles, casting long shadows across the faces of his officers. Each of them worked in sync, hands flying over controls, their eyes locked on the blinking displays. Commander Ilaria, his second in command, glanced at him with a flicker of uncertainty. "Do you think they'll even notice when we're gone?" she asked, half joking, half serious. "They'll notice," Theron replied, his steely gaze fixed on the viewport, where the Galactic Council's sprawling armada floated in the distance. "Arrogance always makes people slow to react." Back in the council chamber, the laughter swelled. The representatives were too caught up in their collective hubris to pay attention to the strange energy readings spiking from the human ships. Zorlok stood, addressing the chamber with the air of a victor who hadn't yet fought the battle. "Let this be a lesson to any species that dares challenge the Council. Earth may be bold, but their technological ignorance is." The Admiral's voice cut off mid-sentence. The holofeed sputtered, glitching for a moment before going black. The laughter halted abruptly as the council members turned toward the central display, confusion rippling through the room. Zorlok's eyes narrowed, his hand gripping the edge of his console as if trying to regain control of the situation. "What happened?" one of the representatives hissed, swiveling toward a technician. Zorlok barked an order, his voice cracking under pressure. "Bring the feed back. I want those ships on screen." But the screen remained black. Across the council's sensor grid, human ships were no longer registering. The blips that had dotted their radar mere moments ago had vanished entirely, leaving only empty space. No one in the room spoke as realization dawned, their faces morphing from smugness to confusion, and then to fear. On the bridge of the human flagship, Commander Ilaria exhaled, tension draining from her shoulders. "They won't be laughing much longer." Theron nodded, watching as the last of the Council's fleet flickered out of sight on their radar. "No," he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of inevitability. "They'll learn soon enough." The chapter closed with the council chambers plunged into silence, the weight of what they had just witnessed hanging over them like a storm about to break. The human ships had not vanished into thin air, they had just moved into position, far beyond the council's understanding. The tension in the Galactic Council chamber was palpable. The once lively laughter had withered away, replaced by a thick silence that clung to the air. Zorlok's clawed fingers dug into the edge of his console, his eyes darting over the data streams that showed nothing, no readings, no signatures, no trace of the human fleet. "How could they just vanish?" a counselor muttered, her voice trembling. Her scaled tail flicked nervously behind her. Zorlok's gaze snapped to the technician frantically tapping away at his console. "Find them!" he barked, his voice a sharp contrast to the calm authority he had once wielded. "We cannot lose a fleet of that size." Behind him, murmurs rippled through the room. The council members, once assured of their superiority, now exchanged uneasy glances. Some shifted in their seats, while others tapped their comm units, seeking answers from their fleets. The technician swallowed hard, his hands shaking as he brought up the latest sensor data. "Admiral, there's nothing. It's as if they've slipped into another dimension or cloaked entirely." Impossible, Zorlak hissed. Human technology doesn't have that capability. In the corner of the chamber, High Representative Navera, a being with luminous eyes and a shimmering gown of stardust, stood. Her voice was soft, yet it carried a weight that silenced the room. Perhaps we have underestimated them, Admiral. Arrogance has blinded us before. Zorlak bristled, but the doubt gnawed at him now. His confidence was a mask, cracking under the pressure. Send out probes. Spread the fleet wide. I want every inch of space between us and Earth scanned. But the unease had already settled deep into the bones of the Council. What if their most dangerous assumption, that humanity was inferior, was wrong? What if the humans had developed technology far beyond their grasp? Zorlak pushed the thoughts aside. No. Humans were reckless, primitive. They couldn't have evolved beyond their known limits in such a short time. Aboard the human flagship, the Resolute. The bridge was awash with the soft hum of electronics and the quiet intensity of controlled focus. Captain Theron stood at the center, hands behind his back, his posture radiating calm. In the faint glow of the display screens, the rest of the fleet drifted silently in formation, their cloaking systems now active. They're scrambling, Ilaria remarked, eyes fixed on the tactical display. Probes launching from their warships, but they won't find us. Theron nodded, his expression unreadable. Good. The longer they're confused, the better. It gives us time. Time for what? Ilaria asked, though she already knew the answer. Her fingers twitched on the edge of her console, anticipation lacing her voice. To make them regret their arrogance, Theron said quietly. His tone was devoid of malice, simply stating a fact. His eyes flickered toward the viewport, where the distant specks of the Council's fleet dotted the expanse. Position the fleet. Have each battle group fan out and prepare for the first phase. Ilaria relayed the order, and the human ships, invisible to their enemies, began to move like phantoms in the dark. Theron's heart beat steadily, though the weight of the moment wasn't lost on him. Humanity had been pushed aside, underestimated for so long. But no longer. Back in the Council chamber, Zorlak's temper flared as more reports flooded in. Nothing. Still nothing. His mind raced, searching for answers. What are they doing? Where have they gone? He turned to the Council, his voice rising. This is a trick. A bluff. They want us to believe they've disappeared. But they can't hide forever. Navera spoke again, her luminous eyes narrowing. Or perhaps they're not hiding at all. Perhaps they are watching us, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Zorlak growled, unwilling to show any more weakness. Enough! I will not sit here and be toyed with by a lesser species. We outnumber them 10-1. Prepare to engage. But just as his words echoed through the chamber, an alert rang out. The main display flickered to life, revealing the vast expanse of space before the Council's armada. And then, one by one, the human ships reappeared. They shimmered into existence like ghosts emerging from the void, their sleek forms gliding through the darkness with unnerving precision. The Council members froze, eyes wide as they took in the sheer number of ships, far more than they had initially counted. Zorlak's stomach twisted. His bravado evaporated in the face of an undeniable reality. The humans hadn't disappeared. They had multiplied. The technician's voice cracked as he whispered, Admiral, we've been surrounded. Zorlak's hands clenched the edge of his console, knuckles white. His voice, now barely a whisper, dripped with disbelief. How? The answer, however, was simple. Humanity had never been predictable. And now, they were ready to show the galaxy what they were truly capable of. The air aboard the Resolute was heavy with anticipation. Every officer, every crew member, stood at their stations, eyes focused on their screens, fingers ready to act. Yet the only sound that filled the bridge was the steady hum of the ship's systems. Captain Theron paced quietly, his movements measured and deliberate, his mind racing through scenarios and contingencies. In his heart, he knew this moment would define the future, not just for humanity but for the entire galaxy. Status report, he said, his voice breaking the stillness. Ilaria, his second-in-command, leaned over her console, scanning the latest updates. The fleet is in position. All battle groups have reported in. Stealth systems are holding. No signs of detection yet. Theron nodded, the gravity of the moment pressing down on him. The Galactic Council's armada was vast, an imposing force spread across the stars, bristling with the latest in alien weaponry. But Theron knew something they didn't. Humanity had evolved in ways they couldn't comprehend. They had become something more than just another race in the galaxy. And soon, the Council would understand that truth. They're preparing to engage, Ilaria said, glancing at the tactical display. Zorlok's fleet is moving into an aggressive formation. Theron stopped pacing and stood before the viewport, his gaze fixed on the distant enemy ships. He could feel the tension radiating from his crew, their silent anticipation palpable. But he remained calm, a beacon of resolve in the face of overwhelming odds. "Let them come," he murmured. On the Galactic Council's flagship, Admiral Zorlok's eyes blazed with fury. The humans had reappeared, no longer hiding, no longer evading. They had made their move, but it was a mistake. He would crush them, wipe their existence from the stars, and prove to the Council that humanity was nothing more than an overreaching pest. "Prepare to engage all weapons," Zorlok ordered, his voice a low growl. He could feel the weight of the Council's eyes on him, their judgment hanging in the balance. He would not fail. He could not fail. Technicians scrambled to comply, inputting commands and readying the ship's massive arsenal. Zorlok's gaze locked onto the tactical display, where the human ships now glimmered in the distance. They were outnumbered, outgunned. There was no escape. A holographic display flickered to life beside him, showing High Representative Navera's impassive face. "Admiral," she began, her tone cool, "do not underestimate them again. Humanity has proven unpredictable." Zorlok clenched his fists, resisting the urge to snap back. He had already underestimated them once, and it had cost him. But not this time. "I will deal with them. This will be over quickly." Navera's expression remained unreadable. "See that it is." As the hologram faded, Zorlok turned his attention back to the battlefield. The humans were still motionless, waiting. It was time to show them the consequences of defying the Council. Aboard the Resolute. "Enemy fleet is closing in," Ilaria reported, her voice tight with focus. "They're moving into attack range." Theron took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment settle over him. He could sense his crew's readiness, their discipline honed through years of training. But this battle was different. This was not just about strategy or tactics. This was about proving humanity's worth in a galaxy that had long dismissed them. "Hold your fire," he ordered. "We make our move when they're committed." The seconds stretched into an eternity as the Council's armada drew nearer. The tension mounted, a coiled spring ready to snap. Theron's hand hovered over the controls, waiting for the perfect moment. Every breath, every heartbeat seemed magnified in the stillness of the bridge. Suddenly, the tactical display lit up in a flurry of movement. The enemy's ships surged forward, weapons charging, their intent unmistakable. "No," Theron said, his voice firm. In an instant, the human fleet burst into motion. Cloaking systems disengaged, revealing their true numbers, far more than the Council had anticipated. Dozens of sleek warships broke formation, weaving through the stars with the precision of predators stalking their prey. "Open fire," Theron commanded. The Resolute's cannons roared to life, unleashing a torrent of energy that sliced through the void. Across the battlefield, beams of light streaked toward the Council's ships, impacting with devastating force. Explosions rippled through the enemy ranks as their shields faltered under the relentless barrage. Zorlok's fleet reeled, caught off guard by the sheer ferocity of the attack. Ships disintegrated in flashes of blinding light, debris scattering across the void. The humans had struck first, and struck hard. On the Galactic Council's flagship, Zorlok staggered as the flagship's hull shuddered under the impact of the human assault. His eyes widened in disbelief as the tactical display flashed red, ship after ship falling to the relentless onslaught. This wasn't possible. They had outnumbered the humans 10-1, and yet. How? He snarled, gripping the edge of his console. How are they doing this? His bridge crew was in chaos, scrambling to regain control of the situation. But it was too late. The humans had the advantage, and they weren't letting go. Zorlok's fury boiled over. Return fire! All batteries, fire at will! But even as the Council's ships retaliated, it was clear the tide had turned. The humans had seized the initiative, and their precision strikes were tearing through the Council's defenses with brutal efficiency. Zorlok's mind raced, searching for a way out, but the realization struck him like a blow to the chest. They had been outmaneuvered, outclassed, and it was only a matter of time before the humans closed in for the kill. Theron watched as the Council's fleet faltered, their formation breaking apart under the sustained assault. His eyes were cold, calculating. This was not a victory born of numbers, it was a victory born of preparation, of discipline, and of humanity's refusal to be underestimated. We've broken their lines, Ilaria said, a hint of awe in her voice. They're retreating. Theron didn't smile. There was no satisfaction in watching an arrogant enemy fall. There was only the understanding that this battle had merely been the first step. Prepare for Phase 2, he said, his voice calm. This isn't over yet. The void beyond the viewport was eerily quiet now, the aftermath of the battle settling like a heavy shroud over the Resolute. Captain Theron stood at the center of the bridge, his posture rigid as he surveyed the remnants of the Galactic Council's fleet. Distant explosions still rippled through the darkness, signaling the last few enemy ships succumbing to the relentless assault. But something felt wrong. Too easy. Status report, Theron ordered, his tone as even as ever, though a flicker of unease tightened his chest. Ilaria didn't look up from her station, her fingers flying over the console. Enemy fleet in full retreat. 57 confirmed kills. We've sustained minor damage, but no critical systems are compromised. The tactical display showed the retreating Council ships, some limping away, others powering down entirely, leaving nothing but debris in their wake. It was a victory, an overwhelming one at that. Yet Theron couldn't shake the feeling gnawing at him. How could they be this unprepared? Ilaria muttered under her breath. She shared the same sense of disbelief. They were completely outmaneuvered. This shouldn't have been so one-sided. Exactly, Theron replied. His voice was low, more to himself than to her. It's too clean. Before she could respond, an alert chirped from the navigation console. Lieutenant Davos, a junior officer known for his keen instincts, turned with a sharp expression. Captain, something's wrong. I'm detecting faint anomalies near the outer rim of our sector. Theron moved to Davos's station in 2 swift steps. The readings were faint, barely registering on the instruments, but there they were, unidentifiable energy spikes. Subtle, almost invisible. But definitely there. They're hiding something, Theron muttered. His mind worked rapidly, piecing together the puzzle. This wasn't just a tactical retreat. It was a diversion. Ilaria, raise shields, he barked, all hesitation gone. Davos, give me full scans on those anomalies. Prepare for incoming. The crews sprang into action, their earlier relief turning into focused determination. Theron's instincts had saved them before, and they trusted him without question. On the Council's shadow fleet, Admiral Zorlok stood in silence aboard his command ship, the Nemesis, hidden within the dark shadows of a distant nebula. His eyes, cold and calculating, watched as the human fleet celebrated their victory. He allowed himself a thin, humorless smile. Fools, he whispered. They think they've won. The Council had never intended to fight the humans head-on, not with such obvious tactics. The real strength of the Council's military was its elite forces, the Shadow Fleet, designed for covert warfare, armed with technology even the humans couldn't predict. This was the game Zorlok had been playing all along. He had sacrificed pawns to lure the humans into overconfidence, and now they would pay the price. A low, mechanical voice interrupted his thoughts. Admiral, the cloaked squadrons are in position. Ready to strike on your command. Zorlok took a deep breath, relishing the moment. Send in the first wave. Aboard the Resolute. The ship jolted violently, throwing the crew off balance. The lights flickered, and alarms blared through the bridge. Theron barely caught himself against the nearest railing before the deck righted itself. Report! He shouted. Shields at 70%! Ilaria called out, her voice strained. Multiple impacts across the starboard side. We've got incoming fire from everywhere! Theron's eyes snapped to the tactical display. Dozens of enemy signatures flickered into existence around them, emerging from cloaked positions, their energy readings spiking in rapid succession. Ships that hadn't been there moments ago now surrounded the human fleet. They're jamming our long-range sensors, Davos added, frustration leaking into his usually composed voice. I can't get a clear fix on their positions, they're moving too fast. Focus on the closest ships, Theron ordered. We need to re-establish formation. Get me firing solutions on the lead attackers. But even as he spoke, he knew they were at a disadvantage. The Council's Shadow Fleet was a myth whispered about in military circles, rumored to be unbeatable in stealth combat. Theron had never believed the stories, but now, staring down the brutal efficiency of their ambush, he understood the truth. Ilaria's voice cut through the noise. Captain, they're targeting our engines. If we lose propulsion, we'll be sitting ducks. Theron's mind raced. Their only chance was to fight back with everything they had, but more importantly, they had to outthink the enemy. The Council relied on their cloaking technology and confusion to win, but that also meant they had a predictable strategy, one Theron could exploit. Davos, he snapped. Calculate the most likely trajectories for their ships based on the last firing angles. I don't need precise locations, just the vectors. Davos nodded, his fingers flying over his console. Got it. Feeding the data to weapons control now. Theron turned to Ilaria. Divert power to forward shields and overcharge the main cannons. Fire in wide arcs. They'll try to slip past, but we'll force them into our line of fire. A few tense moments passed as the crew executed the plan. The ship's hull shuddered as another wave of enemy fire pounded against their shields, but the Resolute held. Ready, Captain, Ilaria said, her voice tense. Fire! The Resolute unleashed a barrage of energy, beams cutting through the darkness in sweeping arcs. The wide-area attack strategy wasn't meant to pinpoint their targets but to box them in, forcing the cloaked ships to maneuver away from the overwhelming fire. And it worked. One by one, the enemy ships reappeared, their cloaks breaking as they dodged the onslaught. Suddenly, they were visible, and vulnerable. Now, Theron ordered, his voice cold. Target the engines. Disable them. The crew responded immediately. Precise volleys of fire streaked toward the exposed enemy ships, striking their propulsion systems with devastating accuracy. One after another, the cloaked vessels faltered, their movements slowing as they lost power. Zorlok's fleet, so confident in their ambush, was now on the defensive. Captain, Ilaria said, a note of triumph in her voice. We've disabled 6 ships. The rest are retreating. But Theron didn't relax. He knew this wasn't the end, Zorlok would come again, and next time, he wouldn't be so reckless. This was only the beginning of a much larger game. Prepare the fleet, he said quietly. We need to regroup and analyze their attack patterns. Zorlok isn't finished. And neither were they.